I came home to an empty driveway and an $85,000 SUV that had vanished without a single text, a single call, or a single word of warning. My dad picked up on the second ring and told me without any hesitation at all that he had given my car to my brother Zorion because Zorion is the man of the family. I did not scream. I just asked one question: does he still have that suspended license? Then I dialed 911. Before I get into everything that happened next, I want to know where you are watching from right now. Drop your city or your state in the comments below. I genuinely love seeing where people are tuning in from. If this story is already making your jaw drop, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another story. There are a lot of people out there who have had something taken from them by the very people who were supposed to protect them, and I made this channel for every single one of you. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because what happened that night was a long time coming. I need to explain something before I go any further, because if I just tell you about the car, you will think this was one bad night. It was not. It was the result of 28 years of a family dynamic that treated me like a resource and treated my brother Zorion like a priority. Zorion is 4 years older than me. Growing up in Fort Worth, Texas, everything in the house defaulted to him first. The bigger portion at dinner, the right to pick what the family watched on television, freedom from most household chores because, as my parents explained it, he was still figuring things out. When Zorion broke something, it was an accident. When I broke something, I was careless. When Zorion dropped out of college after one semester, my dad Adriel told everyone at family gatherings that Zorion needed time to find himself. Nobody asked me how my semester was going. I paid for my own education through scholarships and part-time work. Nobody in that house offered once. Not once. When Zorion could not keep a job, my dad gave him money every month and called it startup capital. That money never came back. Nobody brought it up again. I want to be clear about who my dad is, because he is not a cartoon villain. Adriel used to manage a construction crew and he was good at it. He had authority and people listened to him. Then he lost that job when I was 19, and he spent the years after that moving between short-term work that never stuck. The real power in his life dried up slowly, and what replaced it was a habit of making decisions on behalf of the family, especially financial ones, so that he could still feel like the one in charge. When Zorion needed something and could not get it himself, Adriel would find a way to redirect whatever was available in the family toward him. That pattern worked fine for years, because what was available was always something small. The moment I started earning a stable income in San Antonio and building something for myself, I became the new source. It did not happen with a conversation. It happened in layers. When I was 24, Adriel called me and said the house needed a repair, and that since I was the one doing well financially, it made sense for me to cover it. I paid. When I was 26, Zorion asked to borrow money for a new phone and said he would pay me back. He never did. My mom Rosalind stayed quiet through all of it. She did not push Zorion to return the money and she did not stand up for me either. She existed in the middle, which in practice meant she always landed on Zorion's side, because staying quiet when someone is being taken from is not neutrality. When I bought my SUV with money I had saved over 3 years of careful budgeting, my dad's first comment was not congratulations. It was, "Why would you spend that much on a car when the family has so many needs?" He did not say it as a criticism. He said it the way someone states a fact they find obvious. 2 years before the night I came home to an empty driveway, Zorion had his license suspended. He was caught driving with a blood alcohol level over the legal limit. His license was pulled for 18 months. The family's explanation to relatives was that Zorion was taking a break from driving to focus on his health. Nobody told me directly. I found out through a joking text from a cousin. When I asked my mom about it, she said it was old news and not worth discussing. What I did not know until much later was that before the license suspension, Zorion had already been in an accident. He had been driving my mom's car, and he rear-ended another vehicle at an intersection. The other driver was injured. The family paid the person out of pocket to keep it quiet and never filed it properly with insurance. They kept that from me completely. At the time I bought my SUV, Zorion's license was still suspended. My dad knew that, my mom knew that, and neither of them saw it as a reason to stop what happened next. I sat on my front step in San Antonio for about 4 minutes after I hung up on my dad. I was not processing whether to call the police. I had already decided. I was just giving myself 4 minutes to be completely calm before I did it, because I wanted to be clear and I wanted to be accurate, and I did not want emotion to get in the way of a single fact. I called 911 and I told the dispatcher exactly what I knew. I gave them the make, model, color, and license plate of my SUV. I gave them the current estimated value. I told them the vehicle was registered solely in my name and that I had never authorized anyone else to drive it or take it. I told them the name of the person who had the vehicle, his relationship to me, and that his driver's license was currently under suspension. I told them I had the vehicle's location through a tracking application on my phone. The dispatcher asked me directly, did I want to report the vehicle as stolen? I said yes. She asked whether the person in possession of the vehicle had ever been given permission to use it. I said no, and that I had no text messages, voicemails, or written agreements showing otherwise. The call was short. Everything I said was factual. Officer Lavinia arrived at my home within 25 minutes. She was around 40 years old, calm and thorough. She did not make conversation she did not need to make. She reviewed my registration documents, which had only my name. She looked at my original purchase paperwork, which also had only my name. She asked whether I had any communication with my father that showed I had agreed to the vehicle being taken. I opened my text message history with Adriel and handed her the phone. There was no message in that entire history where I said yes to anything involving my car. Then I showed her the tracking application. The vehicle was no longer at my parents' address in Fort Worth. It had been moving for some time and was now on a highway heading north, roughly 30 miles outside Fort Worth. I recognized the direction immediately. There was one destination that made sense given that route, a large casino about 45 minutes north of the city. I told Lavinia the name of the casino. She stepped away and made a call to coordinate with the county sheriff's department in that area. They confirmed the location and agreed to assist. Lavinia came back and asked if I wanted to be present when the vehicle was recovered. I said yes. We drove up in her patrol car. The trip took close to an hour. My phone rang twice during that drive. My dad's name came up on the screen both times. I turned the ringer off and put the phone face down on my lap. There was nothing he could say that would change what I had already set in motion, and I was not going to let his voice take up any space in my head on that drive. The casino parking lot was large and well lit. Lavinia had the precise coordinates from the tracking application, and we found my SUV within 2 minutes of pulling into the lot. It was parked near the entrance of a liquor store attached to the casino building. The engine had been turned off, but the vehicle was still warm. Zorion was standing outside, leaning against the back passenger side of my car. He had a can of beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other, and he was in the middle of a conversation with 2 other men. He looked completely relaxed. He had no idea. Lavinia and a county deputy approached him together. They confirmed the license plate first, then walked up and asked Zorion his name. He gave it without hesitation, still smiling, still in the same easy posture he had been holding. Lavinia told him his license was currently under suspension and asked him to produce his license. He told her it was inside the vehicle. She told him that was not going to be necessary because the status of his license was already confirmed in the system. Zorion's smile changed, not all at once, but it changed. The deputy asked him who the vehicle belonged to. Zorion said it was a family car. Lavinia said the registration showed one owner and that owner was present. Zorion looked past the officers and saw me standing near the patrol car. His face shifted completely. He said my name the way someone says it when they are trying to reset a situation that has already gone too far to reset. I did not say anything back. I did not walk toward him. I stood where I was. He was placed in handcuffs for operating a motor vehicle with a suspended license and for being in possession of a vehicle without the owner's authorization. The deputy noted his condition, the open container, and the smell of alcohol, which added to the charges against him. As they were leading him away, Zorion turned his head toward me and asked how I could do this to my own brother. I still did not answer. There was no answer that would have meant anything to him in that moment, and I did not owe him one. My phone rang again. Adriel, this time I answered. He started talking before I could say a word. He was saying something about family loyalty and about how I had embarrassed everyone. I waited until there was a pause and then I said, Dad, do you understand that Zorion was driving my car with a suspended license and with alcohol in his system? He said Zorion had only driven a short distance. I said, the distance is not the point. The registration is the point. The suspended license is the point. The fact that nobody asked me is the point. Adriel said I was making this bigger than it needed to be. I said, I will call you when I have something new to tell you. Then I ended the call. Lavinia handed me my keys. I got into my SUV and drove it out of that parking lot. Lavinia followed behind for a few miles and then turned off toward the county station. I drove south on the highway alone, back toward San Antonio. I stopped once at a gas station about an hour into the drive. I parked, cut the engine, and sat in the quiet for 15 minutes. Not crying, not on my phone, just sitting. Then I started the car again and kept going. I did not sleep much that first night back. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up the public court records database for Texas. I typed in Zorion's full legal name and his date of birth. The results came back quickly. The suspension was there, exactly as I already knew. But there was something else in the record that I had not known about, a civil case filing from 2 years before the suspension. The case was connected to a vehicular accident at an intersection in Fort Worth. The vehicle involved was registered to my mother Rosalind. The other party had sustained a shoulder injury. The case had been settled privately, meaning money had exchanged hands outside of court to resolve it, and no insurance claim had been filed properly. I sat with that for a while. My family had allowed Zorion to drive my mother's car. He had hit someone. They had paid that person to stay quiet. They had hidden it from me. And then, with all of that history sitting right underneath the surface, my father had handed Zorion the keys to my $85,000 vehicle without asking me a single question. I printed the court record. I also wrote out a timeline on a notepad: the accident, the private settlement, the license suspension, the night he took my car. I kept the notes and the printout in a folder. The following weekend, my parents were hosting a family birthday dinner at the Fort Worth house for my mother's birthday. The plan had been set before any of this happened. Some of my relatives were already going to be there. My Aunt Maya, my Uncle Benedict, and my cousin Dario with his wife Lupe. I decided to go. I did not tell anyone I was coming with documentation. I did not tell anyone what I planned to say. I just confirmed my attendance and drove up the morning of the dinner. When I walked in, the tension was immediate. Zorion was not there. He was in the early stages of dealing with the legal consequences of what had happened. Adriel was seated at the head of the dining table, trying to carry the room with his usual authority. Rosalind was in the kitchen. Maya was already seated, and she and Adriel had clearly been talking before I arrived because both of them stopped when I walked in. Adriel started the conversation before dinner was served. He said I had overreacted. He said calling the police on family was a line that should not have been crossed. He said Zorion was going through a hard time and that I had made it harder. Maya nodded along. Rosalind stayed in the kitchen longer than she needed to. I waited until everyone had moved to the table. Dario and Lupe were there. Maya and Benedict were there. Rosalind had finally sat down. Leocadia, Zorion's girlfriend, was also present. She had come because she thought this was just a birthday dinner. She did not know what was about to happen. I took the folder out of my bag and set it on the table in front of me. I did not raise my voice. I spoke clearly and slowly because I wanted every person at that table to understand what I was saying without having to ask me to repeat it. I told them what the court record showed. Zorion had caused an accident while driving my mother's car. Someone had been physically hurt. The family had paid that person privately to avoid official reporting. Nobody had told me. That was 2 years before his license was suspended for driving under the influence. His license was still under suspension when my father decided to give him access to my vehicle without my knowledge or consent. Maya stopped nodding. Benedict picked up the printed record and read it. Dawa looked at Udrad. Lupa looked at me. Udrad said I should not be airing private family matters in front of everyone. I said, this stopped being a private family matter the moment my car was taken without my permission and driven by someone with a suspended license who had already been in one accident nobody told me about. Lupa said she and Dawa had not known about the accident. Benedict said the same. Udrad said the accident was handled and finished and there was no reason to revisit it. I said, the reason to revisit it is sitting in this folder, and the reason I am saying it out loud is so that everyone here understands what the full picture looks like, not just the version that gets shared when it is convenient. Lakada had not said a word. She was seated at the far end of the table and she had been listening to everything. After I finished, she stood up. She looked at Udrad, then at Rosalind, then back at me. She said that Zorion had told her the SUV was a family vehicle and that I had agreed to let him use it while I was out of town. She said he had told her this directly. Then she looked at me and said she was sorry. She picked up her bag and walked to the front door. I followed her out. In the driveway, Lakada stood by her own car and took a slow breath. She told me she had believed what Zorion said because she had no reason not to. She said she had noticed over the past year that things Zorion told her did not always line up with what she could verify, but she had ignored that pattern. She said she was not going to ignore it anymore. I gave her the phone number of a friend of mine who rented out a spare room on a short-term basis. I told her to reach out if she needed somewhere to stay while she sorted things out. She thanked me and got in her car. I went back inside, said goodbye to Kaia and Lapa, nodded at my aunt and uncle and left. I did not speak to Edrod or Rosalind again before I walked out. Zorion entered into a plea agreement roughly 6 weeks after his arrest. The charges against him included operating a vehicle with a suspended license, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and driving while intoxicated. His prior accident record, even though it had been settled privately, was documented and factored into the court's assessment of his history. He received 3 months in county jail, a fine, and an additional 2-year license suspension beginning from the date of his release. He did not contest the charges. With the evidence that existed, he had very little room to negotiate anything better. I consulted a family law attorney shortly after the dinner at my parents' house. Based on everything that had happened, including the taking of my vehicle, the history of using my name and property without consent, and the documented pattern of behavior, I applied for a protective order against both Edrod and Zorion. The order was granted. For 2 years, neither of them could contact me or come near me. Rosalind called me once after the order was issued. She said I had destroyed the family. I let her finish. Then I told her I had not destroyed anything. I told her I had simply stopped accepting the cost of holding it together on my own. I told her I wished her well and that I hoped she was taking care of herself. Then I ended the call. She did not try again. My vehicle had been held briefly as part of the documentation process, but was returned to me in full once the legal proceedings were far enough along. I took it to a detailing shop I had used before. I dropped it off, walked to a coffee shop nearby, ordered something to drink, and sat by the window for about an hour while they worked on it. When I came back, the car was clean, not just washed, fully detailed, every surface gone over properly. I paid, got in, and drove home. That evening, I went up to the rooftop of my building in San Antonio. I brought a glass of wine and sat in one of the chairs up there. The city was lit up below and people were moving around on the street. I did not think about Zorion that night. I did not think about my father. I thought about the 3 years I had spent saving for that car. I thought about the afternoon I drove it off the lot and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes just to feel what it was like to own something I had built entirely by myself. I still had that. Nobody had actually taken it. They had borrowed it without permission, but ownership does not transfer through entitlement. I had learned that more clearly in the past 6 weeks than in any year before it. There is something I want to say to anyone who has been in a situation where the people closest to you treated your hard work as something they were entitled to share in without asking. The discomfort of holding a boundary is real. The guilt that gets placed on you when you enforce one is real too. But that guilt is not yours. It was handed to you, and you are allowed to hand it back. I am not going to tell you my family is fixed. It is not. I am not going to tell you I feel nothing when I think about how long I let things slide before that night. I do feel something about that. But I am also driving my own car, living in my own space, and for the first time in a very long time, not waiting for the next thing to be taken. That is enough. For now, that is more than enough. If you have ever had a family member treat something you worked for as though it automatically belonged to the whole group, I want to hear about it in the comments. What did you do? Did you speak up, or did you let it go, and do you wish you had handled it differently? Leave your answer below because I read every single comment and I want to know your story. If this video meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes people are in the middle of a situation exactly like this one, and they just need to know that holding the line is not the same as being cold. Hit the like button if you stayed through the whole story, and subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. I post new stories regularly, and every single one of them is true to life in the way that matters most. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end. I hope you go into the rest of your week knowing that what you built belongs to you. Take care of yourself.